So far, this program isn't one that seems to have a particularly large audience. I would attribute that to two things. One, it appears to be a Boostcamp exclusive, so it's only really going to be visible to people that are using that app. And rather than being sourced from like a large-scale influencer, it is coming from the Powerbuilding gyms in Pennsylvania, one of which is in a town/community called King of Prussia. Does the town have like a local nickname, or does everyone there just call it King of Prussia? Seriously, King of Prussia denizens, hit me up. The community took its unusual name in the 18th century from a local tavern named the King of Prussia Inn, which was named after King Frederick the Great of Prussia. For those who are interested in Powerbuild, they do seem to also offer remote coaching services if you are outside of those two townships in Pennsylvania where they actually have physical locations. They have two programs listed in Boostcamp. The intermediate program is available for free. The advanced one is behind the pro paywall. I'm going to talk a little bit about both today, but given that it's the intermediate one that I ran most recently, that's the one I'm going to spend most of this time on. I'll also admit that it wasn't until I started writing this review 4 months after I started running it that I realized that Powerbuild is just the word power build. I have a master's degree. As always, we are starting with our final score for the review, and this program is getting a 7.5 out of 10. I had a great time running this program, and I think that if you are someone who has at least a year or two of lifting experience under their belt and is either looking to just recreationally improve their squat, bench, and deadlift, or you are actually preparing for a meet like I was, this is a very good program that you could use, and especially because it's free on Boostcamp, the number of obstacles in your way are very low. It's not perfect. I did make some pretty substantial changes to it so that it would fit my own priorities and preferences. I'll talk a little bit about that side of things later in the video, so if this is something that you do plan on running, make sure you watch to the end because I will be giving you some pretty specific recommendations on how to approach it. You do need access to a commercial gym. You do need established 1-rep maxes on the 3 big lifts. Its main flaw, though, is that it doesn't really offer you a lot of guidance on how to customize it to your specific needs. On effectiveness, I am giving it full points. It's getting 2 out of 2. I have to. It worked like a charm for me. I used this program to prepare for the meet that I just did a couple of weeks ago. Notably, I did interrupt that training a couple of times, once because I got sick and once because I was testing out the workouts from Old School Iron. Watch that video if you're interested. I arrived on the platform not only the strongest I've ever been, I hit personal records on the squat and deadlift, and I got my bench to the strongest it's been in 2 years. But also, I arrived on the platform mostly free of the aches and pains that I've come to expect in powerlifting prep. I wasn't as exhausted from training as I have been in the past, and in fact, walked out of that meet ready, willing, and able to jump right back into hard training. And that is unusual for a powerlifting prep phase. I would credit part of this program's success, especially when it comes to not feeling super beaten up on the day, to 2 details that it manages really well: progression and load management. It's 4 phases, each of which is 4 weeks long, which fits right into the pocket of what you would want for a dedicated powerlifting prep. The first 2 phases are essentially a gradual accumulation of volume work, and then the second 2 phases gradually whittle down the volume and gradually up the intensity, preparing you, of course, for that all-out 1-rep max attempt that you're going to be making on the day. Each of the 4 phases ends with a sort of deload week. It's not a super huge drop in volume and intensity, but it's just enough that, again, speaking anecdotally, I was able to go into that next phase not feeling super beaten up, not feeling like I was dreading the increase in intensity that was sure to come. As a matter of fact, it was quite the opposite. I was shifting from phase to phase with a great deal of excitement and looking forward to what was coming next. So that's a really good sign. This isn't to say that the training is easy. It's very tough as written. But rather than hyper specializing on the big 3, which I tend to find is where that sense of getting beaten up, fatigued, and exhausted, and eventually start accumulating these little aches and pains and little injuries, where that comes from. Because it has a very reasonable amount of volume on the main lifts, it saves up some room for an assortment of accessories, including isolation work for general development and taking good care of your joints in the process. It's in this side of the workouts where you'll also see things like pyramid sets and drop sets. So there is some like good high intensity work, but the hardest sets are going to be on the accessories, not on the mains, at least not for the first 3/4 of the program. On usability, I will give it a 1.5 out of 2. Being hosted on the Boostcamp app definitely raises this thing's score as far as usability, because the Boostcamp app itself is a very elegantly designed logbook app. Since it has these built-in tools like a 1-rep max calculator, a plate calculator, an automatic rest timer, once you've entered your 1-rep maxes, it'll automatically plug in the loads you're going to be doing on your main movements. And there are demo links for most of the exercises, usually to like a third-party YouTube link. And this is my last quibble, and this is one that is the fault of Boostcamp as an app. It is not really possible to easily log a broken up session. Essentially, once you've declared a workout finished, you do not have the option of going back and picking up where you left off. If we're comparing this to a notebook, no contest, notebook wins on that one. On flexibility, this is where the worst score for it comes, and most of the flaws, in my opinion, derive from. I'm giving it a 0.5 out of 2. It's a little too rigid for its intended user, I think. The flexibility that you do get is largely a result of, again, the Boostcamp app itself, because it is very easy to go digging for exercise substitutions, to reorder exercises in the program, to change your 1-rep maxes later. All of that is completely at your fingertips. And there's like a couple of exercise slots where there are recommended substitutions, but for the most part, there aren't any. And I really do wish that there were more recommended substitutions available, specifically when it comes to the supplemental lifts, the ones that are sort of a branch off from your mains. So like the close grip bench versus competition bench, pause squat versus main squat. You get the idea. Just realized that I forgot to turn on the fairy lights. Doesn't matter if no one else cares, I care. If you are the target demographic for this, which is an intermediate power lifter, you probably have a pretty good idea of what your sticking points are in the main lifts and what your weak points are as far as muscular strength and development. As a result, being able to customize your accessories around that so you can develop those weak points becomes very important once you've sort of ridden the wave of like all the things that are responding really, really well. Chances are you know exactly where in your bench press you get stuck. Chances are you know exactly where in your deadlift you get stuck. Choosing exercises to emphasize those weak points becomes very important. Unfortunately, that's not really accounted for here. There's a broad selection of exercises over the course of the 16 weeks, so it's not like a huge problem. But for example, I did quite a few changes for myself that I do believe served me very well and served me much better than if I had done the program exactly as written. For example, the block pull is one of the main supplemental movements. It is what is slotted in after deadlifts on deadlift day for most of the program. I tried that a couple of times. I found it exhausting, and my sticking point for the deadlift isn't really at mid shin or anything. It's essentially, if I break it off the floor, it's making it all the way most of the time. However, my low back is my weak point in this, so I substituted Jefferson curls. And the intensification of the Jefferson curls in that block pull slot worked perfectly with getting me prepared for my all-out third attempt on meet day, where I had a 10 kilogram PR over my meet last year. And again, that is something I'm very grateful that I did, because my lumbar area got the crap kicked out of it in my last 2 meet preps. And yet I walked into this meet feeling friggin' invincible, specifically when it came to my low back. And that showed. I was able to survive getting into a pretty rounded position, honestly, on those top lifts, and I felt fine. And I don't think that would have been the case if I had gone with the heavier block pulls. Another example of where the rigidity of this thing is kind of to its detriment is that it seems to assume that your deadlift main is conventional. The sumo deadlift is introduced during the hypertrophy phase, basically to function as an accessory. But like if you're a sumo puller, you basically want to swap those, but it doesn't really include that in the instructions as even an option. It doesn't seem to acknowledge that. It just feels a little strange for a powerlifting program to ignore the fact that essentially half of powerlifters are sumo pullers. And don't give me that sumo is cheating bullshit. If it's cheating, you do it. Different people are stronger on different pulls. I'm a conventional puller. My sumo sucks butt. If you are doing your own programming or getting coached, you are going to be focusing in on specific issues that you have been having with those lifts that you are looking to improve. If you are competing in this marketplace, especially on Boostcamp, which is loaded with programs, you really want to make sure that you are touching on all these aspects of what your target is looking for out of the program. So for me, the lack of substitution and substitution guidance, it just feels like a lapse. It just feels like something that should have been there. And for me, it's very obvious that it should have been there. So in conclusion, 0.5. Now on enjoyability, I give it a 1.5. I really liked running this program. And if you are someone who has done power building style training in the past, which honestly, if you haven't, I don't know why you would even be looking at this program as an option, you're going to like this program. You will almost certainly enjoy it. The make or break factor for a lot of these types of programs is whether or not they will demolish you, whether they will take a really long time to complete. A lot of power building programming tries to do way too much, and so you're doing like 90-minute, maybe even like 2-hour sessions in the gym. And for a lot of people, if you have a job, if you have a family, if you have any responsibilities of any kind, sooner or later, you do need to set a hard cap on how much time you're spending in the gym each week. I think this program hits a really, really good balance. Pretty much all of the sessions took me about 60 minutes. One session, the deadlift session each week, took me longer, closer to an hour 15, maybe an hour and a half, depending on the day. And I think I would call that like a just right amount of work. The periodization structure gradually increased how hard I was pushing on these workouts. So while it was never easy, it did a really good job of getting me slowly to that point where what we were training was the ability to grind out that last rep. As I mentioned before, I did make some substitutions based on my own personal preferences and needs, and I highly encourage you to do the same if you choose to run this, especially if you're looking through it and you are thinking about things that you would personally be missing out on or really enjoy doing that aren't there. Put them in, tinker to your heart's delight.
Rebel! Embrace the chaos!
And lastly, on value, I give it a 2 out of 2. It's free. The advanced variation is behind Boostcamp's Pro paywall, which on its own isn't even that expensive. But the intermediate program costs nothing. You're getting 4 months of carefully programmed and periodized training. I'm straight up not going to offer my own alternative to this program like I've usually been doing on these videos, because there's no real alternative that I could really offer that is going to give you more value than what's already there. As a final note on the advanced variation, it's pretty much the same, but with more volume in the form of a 5th day. So the intermediate is a 4-day split, mostly upper lower, essentially squat day, bench day, deadlift day, bench day 2. Very good distribution of volume. So day 5 on the advanced version mixes squat work and bench work, essentially just more overall training on those lifts. And of course, their accessories. Bear in mind that if you are using these programs to prepare for a meet and you want to make sure that you're showing up on the platform in the best condition possible, veer towards the one you know factually you can handle, given that fatigue management is a key component of getting as strong as possible. While there is always a temptation of more is more, do the most you possibly can, most people who are watching this will probably respond best to the lower volume 4-day version of it. If you're interested in any of the other program reviews that I have done, you can click the link here. Thank you so much for watching. Now go get friggin' strong.